My mum may have almost been Bundy's last victim. My mum has told me this story for years and I always thought it was cool and so creepy. This happened 2 days before Ted Bundy was finally caught. For background on Ted Bundy, if you need it, he was a serial killer who brutally murdered many, many female victims, always young and pretty, which is exactly what my mother was. Just under 2 months before this story takes place, he went into a college dorm at Florida State University and murdered 2 girls in there. Then he went to a nearby house and brutally beat up and injured 3 more, all in the span of about 15 minutes. At the time of this story, that was the most recent of his known murders, but it was later found he actually killed a poor little 12-year-old girl between being caught and the college girl's murder. He was handsome and young, and his MO was to be very friendly and charming, and his clean-cut appearance made women trust him. Now, to my mum's story, my mother and father had moved to Tallahassee 2 months prior, and we were living in a so-so area of apartment complexes. My dad was in school at FSU and had a Monday science lab that would let out at unpredictable times, dependent entirely on how long that day's experiment lasted. My mum had not yet found a job and was pretty bored most of the day. She'd go walk to campus on Mondays to try and meet my dad, and the timing happened to be right. But this particular day, this lab had let out before she got there and she didn't see him, so she walked back to their apartment. As she was walking, she turned the corner onto the street where the apartments were, on the other side of the road. Just as she did this, a guy in an orange Volkswagen Beetle, a pretty rare car, at least the colour, was coming down the street towards her, and leaned over and waved at her in a really friendly, excited manner. My mother was rather confused. She and my dad didn't really know anyone down there, but she gave a small wave back. They'd met another young couple a week before, and for a second she thought it might be the husband, but then thought it would be weird for him to wave so excitedly at someone he knew only a little bit. She suddenly felt really uncomfortable about it and wanted to check to see if he was still around without really obviously turning and looking. She realised if she crossed the street toward her apartment, she could get a good look to her right more naturally. As she did so, she saw the car had stopped just across the intersection she had turned the corner around initially. She could see by the lights that the guy was sitting with his foot on the brakes, and worse, that he had his head tilted up and was blatantly watching her in his rearview mirror. She also knew that particular duplex he was stopped in front of was vacant, so there was no way he was waiting for someone or anything like that. My mum was thoroughly freaked out and trying to figure out what to do at this point, as there were no cell phones back then and thus no one she could call. But there was a nice thick tree up ahead a little, and she realised that if she walked behind it she could then walk away at such an angle that the tree would block his line of vision of her for quite a while, and he wouldn't know exactly where she was. She did this, and after getting a decent bit further, she peeped around the blocked line of vision, and his car was gone. She figured he realised she was onto him and didn't want to deal with a woman putting up a fight. As I said at the beginning of the post, Ted Bundy was caught 2 days later in an orange Beetle that was stolen 2 blocks from my parents' apartment. Bundy would apparently often return cars he'd stolen after using them to murder people, and my mum thinks that's what he was planning on doing, but changed his mind, and that's why he was back in the area. So yeah, thankfully my mother was smart and not killed by Ted Bundy, and thus I exist. Hooray!